Toastmaster, President, fellow Toastmasters and friends. 8 years ago when I began Toastmasters, my mentor asked me, Saddiq, do you prefer to be a good speaker, a good impromptu speaker, or a good evaluator? Back then, 3 months into Toastmasters, I couldn't make up my mind. Because how do you define a good speaker, a good impromptu speaker, and a good evaluator? 3 years after the initial recommendation, I realized that all Toastmasters have a certain set of skills that they can use and develop upon. As you realized earlier, some of us are better in using impromptu speaking skills. Some of us are better in evaluating, observing other speakers. And some of us are better off giving humorous presentations. For me, I realized that I was far better in evaluations. And it was in evaluations that I thought I should focus on. So for 5 years, after that 3 years in Toastmasters, I developed, honed, and realized that evaluations is something that we can all develop. The skills to evaluate, to observe, and most importantly, to understand why a speaker does what he or she does. Now, what I'm going to share with you today has nothing to do with my own personal experience, but it has everything to do with how you can become a better evaluator. How many of us over here yearn to become better observers? How many of us wish that one day, as our colleagues, or in SIM, our fellow students, we can look at them, observe their presentation, and then offer some room for suggestion? Good. Now, the role of an evaluator in Toastmasters is very simple. It's only one. It is to offer improvements and suggestions as to how the speaker could improve on his or her delivery. It has nothing to do with the speaker, nothing to do with the event, nothing to do with the speech, nothing to do with the objectives at all. Now, one of the many misconceptions of evaluation is that you should evaluate the speaker. You should evaluate how he looks. You should evaluate how he sounds. You should evaluate his speech content and decide whether it's right or wrong. After 5 years as an evaluator, let me tell you this. There's no such thing as a right or wrong evaluation, only whether it's appropriate or not appropriate. Now, I'm not sure whether the Toastmaster mentioned earlier, but I shall only talk for 5 to 7 minutes because just yesterday I had a cold and I can't sustain for more than 15 minutes. So just bear with me if my voice quality sounds a bit different. Now, one of the few things that many Toastmasters ask me, Saddiq, in the 8 years that you've been a Toastmaster, in the 5 years that you've done evaluations consistently, you've won so many ribbons, about 500. Yes, 500. You can make a curtain and use it for Deepavali or Hari Raya. Now, they ask me this question, Saddiq, how do you manage to develop superb evaluation skills? Is there something that you use in evaluating speakers, no matter whether it's a basic project or an advanced presentation? The answer is very simple, there is. When you look at evaluators, good evaluators, excellent evaluators, they all use one format. Now this format, you might want to write it down, is simply called comments. So it's called compliments, comments, and recommendations. The 3 things that all evaluators need to take note of is simply this: compliments, comments, and recommendation. In Toastmasters, when a speaker comes up here to deliver a speech, whether it's a 5 to 7 minute speech or 10 to 15 minutes, there are only three things that you need to look out for. What are the good aspects that the speaker has shown in the delivery? What are some of the things we should thought the speaker could improve on? In other words, the bad aspects of that presentation. And the last portion of your evaluation is about your suggestions on how that speaker could improve on his or her future presentation. Now let's move on to the first one, compliments. As a speaker, we are here, we have prepared our presentation, we have come up here, delivered our speech. Whether it's good or not is up to the audience to judge. As an evaluator, it is always important to find out whether that speaker has good points. How many of you think that that speakers do not have good points in their presentation? How many of you think that no matter how bad a speaker is, there are definitely good points? Good. The second answer is the right one. When you look at the speaker, whether he's good or not, there's only one thing that you need to look out for: the good points that the speaker has. If let's say you look at Project 2, Organize Your Speech, how many of you know the objectives of Project 2? Good. What is it, Ricky? Next time you raise up your hand so fast.
To speak in an organized manner
Okay,
in which has clear transitions and opening, body, and conclusion.
Okay, very good. Now, if you look at the speech objectives of before that, give him a round of applause. After 8 years of evaluating, I cannot even remember that. Now, if you look at the objectives over here, it is about transitions, it is about the content, and how you move through smoothly between the opening, body, and conclusion. As an evaluator, it is important for you to see how well the speaker has managed to move this transition from one point to another point of the speech, whether he did it smoothly or not smoothly. Now, there are many ways that the speaker can use in delivering these objectives. As an evaluator, look out. What are the words the speaker used? How did he use it? Did he use words that were clear, not complicated, words that are easily digested? If there were certain words that were not very clear or complicated, note them down. But most importantly, take note of all the good points that the speaker has, and then you put them aside. Then you move on to the next part of the evaluation, which is the comments. Now, how many of us have heard speakers who are superb and stunning? How many of us have been to T. Half Acres workshops? Not many. How many of us have been to, Sharaf, name me a good speaker.
Mohammad, Saddiq.
No. Other good speakers.
Barack Obama.
Okay, Barack Obama. How many of us heard his inaugural speech in 2008? A few of us, right? Now, when you listen to such a speech, look at the way he uses words to inspire, to motivate, and to uplift those who are listening to him. Now, when you listen to the speech, how many of you thought that it was perfect, that it was appropriate for the moment? Good. How many of you thought that he could have improved it? Maybe a few, yeah, maybe 2 or 4 persons. Now, this is the frank reality of all speakers. No matter how good you are in speaking, no matter whether you are in Toastmasters for 1 year, 8 years, or 10 years, there's definitely something in your presentation that can be improved upon. Now, this is something that many evaluators tend to forget. I've seen evaluators who have been Toastmasters for 20 or 30 years, distinguished Toastmasters, and the first thing they come up when they deliver the evaluation is this: Ricky, that was a fantastic speech. It was so good that I cannot find anything wrong with it. Now, of course, I'm just lying, I'm just using it as example. Now, how do you feel as a speaker? Do you feel great when your evaluator gives you that evaluation? Or do you feel insulted when you go back home? I think you would feel insulted. Because all speakers know that they're not perfect. No matter how perfect the speech seems to the audience, when the speaker goes back home, there's definitely some areas in his speech or her speech that he or she wants to improve on. It is your job as an evaluator to look out for those areas for improvement. Now, of course, when you talk about areas of improvement, you must be subjective and objective about it. How many of us think that we are all objective persons? Okay, not you again. Richard. How many of Richard, have you seen a speaker? No, this Richard. Okay. Richard, have you seen a speaker who delivers a good speech, but maybe the diction wasn't good? Maybe the speaker manages, to touch your heart, able, to touch your emotions, but maybe he or she doesn't use proper English. Have you heard of such speakers?
I think so.
You have. Now, how will you tell the speaker that he or she needs improvement?
Just give recommendation.
Okay, good. Do you tell the speaker that you are lousy at pronunciation?
Not for me.
You don't. That's why you need to be tactful and diplomatic when you deliver your evaluations. And this is something that many evaluators forget. Because our evaluators, our speakers, are human beings too. Many years ago, someone evaluated me. He was an advanced communicator bronze, but then it was called advanced Toastmaster bronze. He evaluated me, and then the first thing he said, "Saddiq, you sound like a girl." And he said that in a room full of
Girls.
people who are, no, not girls. He said that in a room full of people who are businessmen, doctors, professionals, engineers. It was a very professional meeting. Now, after that meeting, I felt so humiliated that I seriously considered dropping Toastmasters forever. And then when I went back home and I reflected about this particular incident, I realized that many years ago, I did the same thing to a speaker when I was a member of Temasek Polytechnic Toastmasters. There was this one speaker. She wasn't a very extroverted person, very introverted, very shy person. And the first thing I did when I evaluated her was this. Her name was Siti. Siti, you're too shy. You don't have a future as a speaker. The next thing I knew, I never saw Siti again. But back then, it didn't dawn upon me that such harsh words could cause a speaker or Toastmaster to drop Toastmasters and not join any longer. And this is something that many evaluators, some of us among here even, forget. Because many of us forget that our speakers are human beings. And that is why, when you evaluate a person, be careful with the words that you use. This is where we use words like "you might want to try." This is what you should consider. Perhaps it might be fitting if you try this particular new technique. Do not use words like "you should" or "you must" or "you will," because these are words that are hard and may turn off your particular speaker, no matter how experienced he or she may be. The last point that I wanted to cover is this. When you evaluate a speaker, be mindful of the speech that he or she is delivering. Many a times, I see speakers or evaluators evaluating their speakers according to a totally wrong set of objectives. How many of us have been to a speech or listened to an evaluator evaluating a Project 5 speech, Your Body Speaks? How many of us have heard the evaluator giving a totally different evaluation, talking about not body language, but talking about the language, about how to use words, Project 2 objectives, right? Now that's one of the common mistakes that we evaluators always make. You see, when we evaluate a speech, we always try to give the compliments, comments, and recommendations. We try to be tactful and diplomatic, but most importantly, we should evaluate the speech according to the speech objectives. You might want to write this down, because as evaluators, you are evaluating the speaker based on how he or she performs according to the manual that you have been given. If it's a Project 2 speech, evaluate on the way the speaker transitions from point to point. If it's a Project 8 speech, evaluate based on the visual aids used. If it's a Project 10 speech, evaluate based on how the speaker has managed to inspire and motivate the audience. So ladies and gentlemen, there's only a few things that I had to share today. Number one, make sure your speech evaluation has a structure. The compliments, comments, and recommendation. Second, be tactful and diplomatic when evaluating your speakers. And third, and most importantly, evaluate based on the speech objectives. If you follow all three of these recommendations that I have for you, one day you too can make your own ribbon curtain Toastmaster.